Today I will talk to you about collaborations between artists and scientists. I will talk why they should take place and how they work. And as I'm an organizational researcher by training, I will talk to you about this from an organizational studies lens. So if there are some question marks now, I can reassure you that's totally normal. So I think by now my parents and some of my dearest friends don't know what it exactly is what I'm making my living of and what it's exactly good for. But I accept the challenge and take this opportunity to make an explanation. So shortly, it's very simple. I help artists and scientists to collaborate and to learn from each other to reach their shared goals they individually approach through art or science. So these shared goals are very complex topics. So we talk here about things like climate change, antibiotic resistance, or the secrets of our universe. So it seems a no-brainer. Artists and scientists, people from very different backgrounds with different knowledge and skills have to collaborate so that we know, so that we get a better knowledge about this, so that we understand these topics. And sometimes it's just the effect of having interesting conversations, confrontational discussions, and having fun that leads to the greatest outcomes. So why exactly art and science? So artists and scientists are both creative individuals. They want to push the boundaries of our knowledge. They want to push these topics that are so important for us as society and as individuals. So nevertheless, they do this with art or science, so it seems completely far apart. Thinking about art, most people think about paintings, drawings, music occurs to some, and some think about media art or kinetic art. So that's all what we're talking about. We also talk about poetry and other things like performance and theater. But these people creating these artworks live in a certain environment, so they don't have this normal 9-to-5 job others in an office would experience. And they have to deal with this crazy art market where many people earn close to nothing and others immense amounts of money. But you also know there's a lot of skill and training necessary that you can create such an important artwork. So, for example, if somebody would ask you to create a Mona Lisa or to write an important tune, you certainly would say, oh, maybe that's not what I'm trained in. And thinking about training, you also think about science. So you think about scientific outcomes like the theory of relativity, where you also need a specific training. You also probably think about laboratories, microscopes and telescopes and experiments being done. And again, you think about these people creating this amazing work that walk around in laboratory coats, do experiments, think about their data, and have this special training where they know how to talk to their peers on conferences, to talk about their outcomes, and where they interact in universities and corporations with a scientific department. So I don't want to push the stereotypes too far, but there are certain differences between the routines and organizational structures between art and science that create a different normal for these people. So they have a different understanding of what are their goals, their individuals' goals, what they have to do to reach a certain career goal. And this is important when it comes to collaboration between artists and scientists, because normally when we understand our world through our practices, routines, and organizational structures, this also frames how we would then ask new questions, with whom we would collaborate in our next project, and how we would approach that. But at the same time, we know that new experiences, openness, and completely different views can lead to the greatest outcomes. and what actually creates a more exciting experience than the collision of art and science, the clash of these two different worlds. So what interests us now is how it came to this, or this. So what we are seeing here are artworks that came out of this collaboration between artists and scientists. These are works that tackled topics like climate change, new technologies, what can we do with them, or habitable planets outside of our solar system. So what I do here and what happens in art-science collaboration processes is that artists and scientists, with their different normal, get together and have to think about their issues together from their different point of views. So these different point of views come from their different perspectives. And these different perspectives, now my training as organizational researcher comes in quite handy, are analyzed through organizational studies, because organizational research asks how do structures, routines, and processes frame our understanding of what is normal to us. And for that, it uses tools and theories from fields like psychology, philosophy, sociology, cultural studies, or anthropology. And now I want to go into some concrete examples of that. So first of all, we again have these different structures, these different routines. So these lead to different career goals. So a scientist has to act differently as an artist, although they want to reach maybe the same goal, talk about climate change. So a scientist has to work analytically on a very specific topic, whereas an artist can approach a topic from a completely different way. They can draw from many different fields and bring this together to make the field or the topic experienceable. When we now talk about a collaboration, this mix can create an important step in contextualization of the work being done, about thinking about implications of the scientific work. As an chemist told me that this collaboration with the artist helped him to understand his own work differently. Because he works on this something very specific, he would not have thought about the value for society that his work brings with it. So he now understands there is a value outside the scientific community. And this seems like something very small, but actually it's something really important, because this creates meaning for the scientists, and it creates some motivational and inspirational aspects. So it also frames which next questions and which next research questions are approached. And another example is that art-science collaborations can help to create a space to break free from organizational structures. So like in this case here, using an anthropological term, it creates a liminal space. So it creates a space where we are free to experiment, free from routines and peer pressure that allows us to playfully work with what we have, with the tools and the technologies. So that's what happened here too, so that we just created completely new devices. Another important aspect are raising ethical questions. So artists getting in contact and working with scientists can start to raise these important questions about how do we deal and what do we think of our consumption of leather and meat? And what would we think about it if we grew it artificially? And then there is another communicational aspect I want to talk about. It's the communication between different fields of science, but also with the public. This project deals with antibiotic resistance. It asks, where is it coming from? Where did it start in our society? And can we cut it out of our bacteria's genome with newest technological possibilities in science? And this is a very important tool to talk between disciplines, but also to communicate this with the public. There is one last example I want to give from a theoretical perspective, and it's on sense-making processes and its connections to aesthetics. We all know that we make our sense of the world through our senses. We see it, we feel it, we hear it. And at the same time, scientists are supposed to be very analytical, very rational, but they also make sense of the world and of the data they gather with their scientific tools through their senses. So they create a very specific way to look at the data. But we also know that in normal understanding, aesthetics is more connected to art, and that new aesthetical experiences help us to create a complete, or to see the world in a completely different light. So a cosmologist once told me that his engagement in music helped him to see his data completely differently, to reinterpret it from a different point of view, to get a different feeling for it, which then helped him in his further analysis. So these are just a few examples. There are more examples with these different theoretical lenses, but also talking about other theoretical lenses like social networking theory. I think, again, it looks like a no-brainer. If you have many different people coming together, different information, you heighten the chance for inspiration and new possibilities. So basic idea behind this is when we expand what is normal for us through getting in contact with people who have a completely different environment and live in a completely different normal, we are able to approach problems in a completely different way. Maybe we are able to solve them or even to pass them by. So in that sense, as I just said, the environment for every project is different. So every project has its different development. But there are a few things that are true for all of them. And these 4 things are time, not to be afraid, freedom, and funding. So first, of course, you need time to engage in the other's normal, to dive into this new world, to experience it, and to live and investigate it. But this willingness to dive into this world and this new experience also helps us to get over the fear to cross these boundaries. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the scientific jargon you might be provided with in a scientific discipline, or with the complex context an artwork might show you. If you're not afraid, you are able to dive into this new world and to learn about the field, but also to learn about yourself. And third, we've got freedom. So freedom stands for, it's important for us to be allowed to dive into this world without fearing negative consequences in our professional life or fearing negative critique from our peers. And third, funding. So art-science collaborations can be quite costly. People need to take time. There are scientists and artists involved, and probably somebody who facilitates it and helps. And there's materials needed and experiments being done. And of course, as I just said, there is something happening afterwards, but it's not for an immediately scientifically or economically valuable outcome. So this brings us to the third logics of business and governments, money and taxes. So you are all allowed to ask, why should I, with my tax money, fund such an experimentation of artists and scientists where we cannot say that we immediately have a valuable outcome? Or why should a corporation do this, invest in something that does not immediately lead to something that can be sold or that promises innovation in a certain time frame. So for that, I can only say some steps, small steps, can be planned, can be anticipated. We can work towards that. But paradigm-shifting approaches often came without announcement. And as science shows, those people engaged in as many fields as possible with experience in art and science are those more likely to bring about such change. So if we want this, we have to support it. Thank you.